And it's a very good afternoon to the smaller than usual Sportsfan Radio panel today. We've got the judge, the Gelding. Paul Dalligan will be joining us shortly, but plenty to discuss in sport, not the least of which was the headlines about Tasmania and them trying to get another or a team into the AFL. Judge, interesting remarks from the Sydney president, which I thought seems to me a softening of the AFL's approach to having a team in Tasmania.
Yeah, look, it's inevitable. I think we'd have to agree, isn't it, Mark? It's going to happen. The only question is who is it going to be a new team or a relocated team? And I think the decision is going to be made. I'm just checking, but I think it's in August. They're going to make a decision about it. Professor, this has got mud written all over it, doesn't it? This whole Tasmanian thing. As you know, in meetings, high-level meetings, when you go into a meeting, you already know the result. You don't want to have a S-hit fight in the meeting as to what's going to be decided. Surely this has been decided by now. And this business about relocation or a new team, spare me. Surely the AFL knows by now what they're going to do.
Well, I thought the language used by Andrew Pridham was condescending, really, or patronising. They want to give Tasmanians a better football experience.
Yeah. It's condescending is the word, particularly when you look at the Sydney situation. Sydney with a population of, 5 million or so. Tasmania with a population of 1/10 of that. Tasmania will belt Sydney, I think, in terms of the enthusiasm for the game, the support for the game, the financial support for the game, the sponsors they're going to generate. It is patronising. Well, what sort of experience are they having in Sydney where they've got 5 million people and their second team can't get 10,000 people to go to the games?
Question for both of you. Why is it that the AFL club presidents have the say on them joining and not the commission?
Great question, Gelding. And isn't it extraordinary that because there's so much of a lack of leadership at the AFL, and I'm talking about the commission here because at the end of the day, they're the people that run this game, there's nothing. Nature abhors a vacuum. And so when there is a vacuum of leadership, of course, the subalterns come in, the presidents of the footy club to fill that void. And it's wrong. This should be coming from the commission. It should be coming from the CEO. That position is just becoming a disaster, I think, Bill. Is he in? Is he out? Is he leading the place? No, he clearly is not. So it goes to that lack of leadership, Gelding, because we don't serve in the commission.
Has the AFL closed down the commission or something? Like they're not commenting on anything. Like AFL women's footy, this 19th franchise, which surely the commission should have control of, because the AFL presidents have got vested interest in their own club, right? So why would they want to see all these other things going to the 19th?
Gelding, is it a 19th team or is it an 18th team from somewhere else? And they always talk about poor old bloody North Melbourne, who must be sick of it. They've got no debt. St Kilda, I've said this before, but St Kilda was a company, which it actually is, but a commercial company, they'd be wound up by now because they're insolvent. But they always go on to North Melbourne. Isn't the obvious thing, maybe it's just me, is to just give up in the Greater Western Sydney debacle? It's not going to get any better, and relocate that to Tasmania. But the fact that we are at the decision's door and nobody out there in the community, us included, have got any idea whether they're talking about a 19th team or a relocated team. Do you think there'll be a 19th team?
Yeah, John, only because if you look at the histories of clubs trying to relocate, like you go back into the 70s, when the Swans moved to Sydney, there was a complete breakaway group stay at Melbourne. Fitzroy up to Brisbane, that was a takeover. more than anything, more than a relocation. And then they've tried to get North Melbourne to the Gold Coast. And then there was a big backlash, and we'll be self-funded, we'll look after ourselves. Then they do this deal down at Hobart, but they say they won't relocate there, but they'll play home games there. Like, personally, and I've spoken to North Melbourne members and have mates there and things like that, and a mate of mine said, wouldn't it be fantastic? He'd be a member of North Melbourne. He could go down to Tassie, Hobart 3 or 4 times a year for the games and have weekends there and have breaks and still get to see them, 11 times in Victoria at the MCG or Marvel.
How would you like if Richmond, it became the Richmond Devils or the Tasmanian Tigers or whatever?
You always say no to it, John, but look, sometimes it becomes a necessity. And does this decision come back, when the AFL was formed, are there too many sides in Melbourne?
Well, Melbourne's almost unique. The only city in the world that's got as many professional football clubs as London. I think London's got 12. We've got 10. So it is extraordinary. But you have to also say that the appetite for Melbourne supporters for sport generally, and particularly our great game, is also unique in the world. I think it's and the amount of members. There's about 1 million Australians and our members of football clubs. Just to go back to those teams, Brisbane, okay, it was Fitzroy. Fitzroy wouldn't have had those 3 premierships that Brisbane got at the start of the 2000s. Sydney's had 2 premierships it probably wouldn't have got. Both of those clubs by now would have been bankrupt, and those 10 Melbourne teams will be down to 8, which is probably manageable. So I think begrudgingly, the supporters of those 2 teams, Fitzroy and Swans, would say, yeah, on balance was probably a good thing. We wouldn't have actually had a team. Whereas North Melbourne, not going well at the moment, but I'd support their right to exist as they want to. And I would think, Gelding, that most of the members would prefer the side to stay in Melbourne, but with the option, which they're doing now, of playing a number of games in Tasmania.
But John, won't it occur that if Tasmania, say, gets their own licence by itself, this sponsorship that Tasmania has been providing to North Melbourne and also to Hawthorn, I think those agreements will then cease, and that money will have to go from the Tasmanian government. It's part of their bid, I think, is that money will go into the Tasmanian team. So you're going to have 2 Victorian AFL clubs that rely heavily on Tasmanian money and games, losing that money when this side comes in.
Yeah, true. Which raises another issue, which we've discussed previously, about how many clubs are actually insolvent. And whilst North Melbourne may not have any debt, it actually relies upon the handout from the league, as do about 10 of the other clubs. So that's a whole different issue, and it raises the issue of more sponsorship, better broadcasting deals, which then raises the issue of who the hell is going to be the CEO of the AFL to source all this money.
All right, gentlemen, we might truncate that discussion there because Paul Dalligan's joined the meeting and he is on a shorter fuse than you, Judge, for today's show. So we might go to NRL. Before we start talking about round 13, Paul, huge news during the week that Ray Warren retired at the age of 78, colloquially known as the voice of the NRL.
Very sad. I've been listening to that voice longer than you have mine, you might think, Professor, since I started following rugby league. So he's always been the perfect commentator, maybe in the Richie Benaud mould, I'd put it, that it doesn't overspeak, lets the action speak for itself, understands that he's on the television medium and not radio. So he'd just be so excited, though. That's where you would have to contrast him to Richie Benaud. He'd have probably not quite the Darryl Eastlake level of gusto, but he was just a brilliant analyst and a great commentator, and he will be missed because to a lot of people, he is rugby league and particularly State of Origin. If you're talking about favourite time of year for rugby league fans, this included, it would be State of Origin, and you just would be expecting Ray Warren to be involved. So he's been such a wonderful part of league's history. I don't know the AFL equivalent in terms of commentating. Brian Taylor doesn't seem to have the same level. I'd almost put him in the Bruce McAvaney mold.
Yeah.
Who will be commentating on Wednesday night in the first State of Origin?
Well, you'll have Andrew Johns there. He's been demoted recently to sideline eye. I don't think he's too amused with that. Obviously, Brad Fittler will be on other duties, but they're going to have a round table, I'd say, of probably former players. Cameron Smith will no doubt pop his head on the screen, and they'll be having a lot of crosses, which they didn't used to do, which I really enjoy, getting more sort of closer to the action.
Well, Gus Gould would have to be thereabouts, wouldn't he? They always turn to him.
He's always
to have
thereabouts.
some comment.
He was even thereabouts when he's commentating on Canterbury games, and he's the head of Canterbury. I find that an incredible conflict, the same way that Cooter, I know, doesn't like Braith Anasta appearing regularly when he's Cameron Munster's manager on shows discussing Cameron Munster's future. So Phil Gould, he loves an ill-fitting suit. I don't know why he can't afford a suit that fits him properly, but he'll be walking around the goalpost at the start of the game. Last year, I think he called on Game of Thrones. Maybe this year, I don't know, he might have Handmaid's Tale or something that's inspired him to give his pre-origin rant / inspirational chat.
All right, Paul, let's look at round 13. It's fewer games this round due to the number of buys because of State of Origin. Started on Thursday night, though. A danger game that could have been for the Cowboys with a number of stars out for Origin. But looking at Justin Holbrook after the match, he's a man without any answers at all, Paul.
Yeah, he just he made ScoMo look inspiring, I think, after the last election. It actually, this round I will show, and if we've talked about many times, it's not your superstars necessarily that win you competitions, it's your depth. And when you look at your Cowboys missing 4 star players, and we'll get to Manly missing their 2 best players, and yet they still had resounding wins, I think it separates the good teams from the very ordinary, and will put the Titans firmly in that very ordinary camp. Can I say it's a touch perhaps ironic that it's the Gold Coast Suns that might be the team that finally does something from that area and not the Titans?
Well, the Titans have been very disappointing after a lot was expected after last year, Paul. Holbrook's been in charge. This is his 3rd year. He's got a record of 22 wins, 36 losses. He would surely be under scrutiny, or one of the coaches under scrutiny now.
He'd have to be. What I love about this period, though, is you get to see some players step up. And there's a very nice named player, Scott Drinkwater, playing for the Cowboys. And my 7-year-old son, 8 year now, was saying to me, "Why do I have to drink water? Can't I drink milk?" So he hadn't heard that surname mentioned so many times before. But it was quite a good moment. But on a serious note, Scott Drinkwater has been knocking on the door for a long time. He has stepped up, and it's the depth that gets teams deep into competitions. And I've got to say, with the Rabbitohs last year, they wouldn't have made the grand final without Benji Marshall. So with the Cowboys having players like Scott Drinkwater step up, they are the real deal. I don't know if I've said that yet this year, but they are the real deal, and they'll be thereabouts. Missing 4 of their best players. They've got one of the most exciting players in the game. Hamiso Sabuka Fido. We'll go with Hammer for short. He's up there with Josh Adokar for quickest in the game, and he's producing some real excitement machine performances. So I think the Cowboys are a real dark horse to the Storm and Panthers, who are the obvious two.
Now, Friday night, Paul, the Panthers had less ball, fewer tackles, 6 Origin players out, but Ivan Cleary was happy with the result.
He's not an easy man to please either. That was quite a good win, and I'm sorry, but I expected more from your Dogs. That some of those Panthers players, one of them I'd never heard of, and I think they called him an overnight sensation at 26. Kurt Falls was the stand-in halfback, and he played a blinder. So there's some real issues at the Dogs, and you need to get some players in. Kickow was destructive as always. Some solace for you, Professor. He's coming to the Dogs next year, and next year can only come quick enough for you Dogs fans.
Well, at least Adokar has taken the sting of not making State of Origin and scored another double Friday night. So he looks like he's running himself back into form.
Yeah, I'm worried about that selection. He's the sort of player that gives us that X factor. He's the quickest player in the game. They've gone with a safer option of Daniel Tupou. That has absolutely stunned most rugby league observers, me included. He's not playing well. It's that conundrum. Do you go for more money to a lesser team? That's what he's done, and it's cost him his Origin games, and hopefully not all three, because he is possibly the best winger in the game, and he's been left out. You don't beat Queensland by being safe. That's what I'm worried about. And we're also playing Jack Whiten, who I think will start out of position, and we don't like that, Professor, in any game.
All right. Last night, Schooner was exceptionally happy, Paul. His Sea Eagles got up over the Warriors, and Sydney beat Melbourne. So a lot to like about the Sea Eagles. Nathan Brown was interesting. When he was asked about their effort, he said, first half, one word, horrible.
Well, my Scottish heritage would tell you, as they say, you cannot polish a turd. It's not much you can say about some of these teams' performances, but Schooner would have been happy with Manly, given that they were missing their general. In Cherry Evans, they were exceptional. So they're the real deal as well, and they're finding form at the right time. And you might find that's why the bookies are keeping them very safe in the premiership market, because you've got some superstars there. Jake Trbojevic was the other one, very unlucky to miss out on Origin. He is Origin. He is the sort of player that just holds everyone together. So I'm pretty surprised he missed out as well. But Des Hasler didn't mind, because he's got to win in Origin period, which is often very difficult.
So, big game today. Raiders and the Roosters at 4:05. If the Raiders lose this, they probably might not make the 8, I would have thought.
I think they will lose it, because they're missing their two best players, Jack Whiten, who has been the absolute superstar of that team. And that's why he got picked ahead of Nico Hines, who's had some sort of year. Jack Whiten is just, he's held that team together. But the Roosters have got their starting 6 and 7. So I think that'll be the difference, whereas I just think the Raiders missing their two best players and Josh Papali up forward. I just think the Roosters will have too much class today.
And the final score?
22-14. I think the Roosters will win that. The Raiders will be desperate. It'll be about -4 degrees in Canberra. So you might have the Roosters in the thermal underwear, but I still think they'll get the job done.
And Wednesday night's the big one. State of Origin 1, the Blues against the Maroons. Now, where will it be won and why, Paul?
I just think the New South Wales experience will get it done. There's quite a few debutants. Queensland, Selwyn Cobbo is one to watch, but it's very different being a star in club level to NRL level. So I actually think that the New South Wales will win. Jack Whiten, even though he's playing out of position, but the recommended investment for those doing so is Tony Staggs in the centres for New South Wales, is having a breakout season. He could do, I'll tip it now, what Tom Trbojevic has done in years gone by. He's unbelievably hard to contain. And I just think with that experience of Cleary and Luai at club level, I think that they'll get the job done over Queensland, who don't have that club level combinations as much. I think it's the club level combinations with the Panthers players are going to get them home. New South Wales.
Gelding?
Quick question for the draft. What do you think with State of Origin coming on? I suppose it becomes a yearly question. Do you think there should be rounds of rugby league where some teams like the Panthers are missing 6 players compared to other teams who may not have any representatives? What's your views on whether there should be a suspension of NRL?
I'm happy with the current system, and someone put it very well. In these good teams, because those guys are so good to play Origin, the players that are stepping up, as we've seen with Manly, and we saw it with the Cowboys, they'd be good enough to start at any other team. So it's giving an opportunity to these players who can actually ply their trade, and you'll find that they might be snapped up by other teams and get a starting spot by showing what they can do in this cauldron, which is still a cauldron of regular club footy. So I actually think it's good for the game that these guys get to step up. As much as the club bosses might complain that we've got half a team, you've seen it hasn't affected the better teams.
Paul, can I just ask, what's the thinking? One of the State of Origin games is in Perth. And what's the thinking behind that? I would have thought that was a wasteland, rugby league, but perhaps I'm wrong.
Well, it's more a TV game. These games will rate over 4 million. They'll be probably put the AFL grand final in, but they'll be 3 of the top 5 watched events. You could play it in Spain if you wanted, but what it is, I don't think they're trying to build towards a team in Perth, but they're just taking it to the towns. And I like with the club matches, they're taking them to the country towns. But it's interesting. I think Perth just made a very good business pitch. It's one of the best stadiums in Australia, that Perth stadium. They was putting up their hand up to host AFL. I don't really think the crowd on hand is as relevant as the actual spectacle, which will be watched by 4.5 million people.
Sure.
And you need a neutral venue, and it doesn't get much more neutral than Perth. Otherwise, it's unfair to have 2 of the 3 in one state, I think. So I like the concept.
Can I just digress what Paul was saying earlier about a player being one of the fastest players in the NRL? He raises an issue to me as to what is the ideal NRL player these days. I would have thought good hands, quick as buggery, not necessarily thuggish or largely built. That's your ideal player. But somebody told me a while ago about Scott Pendlebury. So why is he such a good player? He said he makes time stand still, which I thought was an incredible gift. But you know what they mean. What's the looked for skill in a rugby league player these days?
Was very different, because if you're in the middle and you're forward, you've got to be bigger. And Carmichael Hunt, yes. So when Carmichael Hunt signed across to the Suns, he dropped 8 kilos. Now that wasn't fat; that was pure muscle, because AFL's more an aerobic capacity sport, as tough as it is. If you in rugby league, you need to be pretty big or you'll get hurt, but you also need this incredible speed as well. And the pace the club pace has caught up. They used to say Origin was 30% more intense players. They're now saying it's still a step up, but because the club level is so physical and such a test of endurance, Origin isn't as intense in comparison, but it's a brutal spectacle, and that's why it rates so well in America. These guys without pads trying to kill each other. So. The perfect specimen has to be, as you said, fast, good with their hands, but I think it's also endurance as well, because this is a very tough game.
Isn't that Turbo Tommy?
No Turbo Tommy, no, and no Latrell Mitchell.
No, but isn't he the perfect player for NRL? Like, I know the Swans were also after him to play AFL, but at round about, what is he, 6'3" or?
Yep.
And can run like the wind. And what would he be, 95 kg or something like that?
Yeah, I'd say that. You've got a ready-made replacement in Selwyn Cobbo, and it was easier for the press to tell you which clubs weren't chasing him. There's only 2 clubs not chasing him. The Broncos have managed to hold on to him, and the very fine name Herbie Farnworth as well. So the Broncos have got things in place when players now want to stay with the Broncos. But Selwyn Cobbo, you watch him, he is like a gazelle, Gelding. A bit like yourself, I'm sure, if you went for a bit of a canter. He is brilliant to watch. Selwyn Cobbo, but he wouldn't last long if he was playing in the forwards, because he'd get belted.
Gelding, one of these days I'm going to bore you with my theory about I think good runners make good athletes. And if you're not a good runner, it's very difficult to play any high-level sport. Oh. And so what you're saying, Paul, just fits into my theory that the best runners, beautiful runners, good runners, endurance runners often make the best athletes.
And also create time.
Yeah. It's in quite heavy usage. Time. I don't know if it's in AFL, but they use the phrase leg speed. I've always wondered what's the alternative. Is it mental speed, how quick you can knock off a Wordle? Leg speed, normally you get around with your feet. I don't know, but is there an arm speed that's relevant in AFL? They do use leg speed a lot, the commentators.
Very good.
On that, there was a very good example of that, was Greg Williams. He was a very fast player, but they said his hands were fast. His actual legs, he ran up and down on the same spot. But he had a very sharp brain, and again was, as John was saying, has this ability to create time around themselves, and then had fast hands to be able to move the ball on.
And the other guy epitomises that's Wayne Gretzky, the hockey player. I don't know how fast he runs, but he's just got that ability to just go a half second or a split second ahead of everybody else's thinking. That's That's brain.
Well, have a look at Adam Reynolds, would be one of the slowest in that Brisbane club, but he has so much time because he gets the ball and knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
And he looks like he's quicker than what he is.
So that's brain speed.
Yeah, and if it's a 120-kilogram man running at me, I'd find some speed too to turn into Fred Astaire. But he's nimble. That's what I'd call him.
Nimble.
Quite a solidly built guy.
All right, Paul, one last question on Origin before we move on. Cameron Munster, is he the X factor as far as Queensland's concerned?
No, I think Kalen Ponga might have a better game. I think he's primed for this just to show his wares. Cameron Munster perhaps doesn't have to do as much as he does for the Storm because Cherry Evans is, I'd say, a better halfback than Jerome Hughes, contentious. But I think Kalen Ponga might be the difference if Queensland wins.
And do I take it from what you were saying that you believe that Tony Staggs is almost certain to score a try on Wednesday night?
Yes, and I can't come up with a line that rhymes with "don't be" or something, but I think that he'll score, and I think he'll have a breakout game. I think Staggs will be the player of the game. It's a massive call, but I've made some before on here.
Final scores for those who are following along at home?
24-16 to New South Wales, I think.
Okay. Well,
I have a work drinks event. I might be at a sneaky exit stage right, I think, at about 7:50. It's hard to do a phantom at my height, but I think I'll be managing it.
Well, that's a pretty good double for the evening. Work drinks followed by State of Origin.
Life is beautiful. Couldn't script it better.
All right, Paul, we know that you've got prior commitments, so thanks for participating today, and we'll catch you for round 14 and the wash-up of State of Origin 1 next Sunday.
I've got 3 family members I've told to keep quiet. It's not a family trait, so I appreciate it. Thanks for that.
Thanks, Paul. All right, we might do one final topic before we call stumps for today, and of course there's always Gelding's tips. Gelding, why don't you do your tips now, because I think there was one running in race 3 at
Moe.
At Moe.
Yes, Professor, just to quickly mention in relation to racing, overnight, English Derby, probably the world's most famous race, was run and won by Desert Crown, trained by Michael Stout, his 6th English Derby winner. This horse won by 7 lengths, Professor, and has now probably got a value of $40 or $50 million after its big win in the English Derby. Now, today we like at Moe, going on to race 3, number 9, Bay 13, into race 4, number 2, Oxley Jack, 1 for the judge there. Then into race 6, number 8, Wolf Rain, and race 7, number 5, the Great Gretzky, after the judge's mention of Wayne Gretzky there. We'll go the Great Gretzky in race 7. And at Geelong today, Professor, probably the bet of the day, race 6, number 6, Rights of Man. Jamie Carr going down to Geelong for a handful of rides, and I think she can get this one up for Danny O'Brien.
Okay, Gelding, thanks for that. We might finish on this one, gentlemen. A little bit of controversy, and I raise this topic because, Judge, I know that you're involved in a Football League's appeals board. The AFL apologised to Lance Franklin for things that Andrew Woods, the AFL counsel, said at a hearing during the week. I'd like your thoughts on actually both counsel, Duncan Miller and Andrew Woods, using it as some form of theatre rather than actually being sensible and arguing what's actually happened.
Yeah, I didn't follow it entirely, Professor, but it seems to me that weird that the AFL apologises for the tribunal. The tribunal is meant to be totally independent. So what they say is what they say. It's stuff they're not controlled by the AFL or answerable to the AFL. I think that the description was cowardly in relation to Franklin. To my mind, it was so stupid to use that kind of language because the last thing you say about any AFL player is that they're cowards, and certainly Lance Franklin is not. So, yeah, it's not a good look, Professor. They're starting to have this gamesmanship or, sensationalism, and possibly they know the media are there. They're playing to that crowd. I don't like it.
Yeah, having had experience, Judge, things seem to run better when the advocates concentrate more on what the issues are rather than on the people involved and using sensational
language.
Yes, sensational descriptors.
Yeah. No, don't like it, Professor. I mean, it's sort of, it's what I have termed the TikTok generation, and then they know they're playing to that crowd, and I just think they should be better than that. It's a pretty serious matter, actually. And of course, the word cowardly gets out of his lips, and then suddenly it's on a million social media messages 5 minutes later.
Do you think that AFL Council might be have some time on the interchange bench over this?
I think they might, actually. Well, they certainly should. A bit of time to reflect, a bit of time out.
Time to reflect.
Reflect on your sins. Gelding, you were going to say something.
I was just going to say maybe that should be the thing, because I think cancel also for Franklin, and they refer to them both as cancel, which I find is very interesting, whereas I think Mark had the right words. They're really only just players' advocates, aren't they?
Yeah.
To present their case.
Yeah.
Are they really needed in the system? Shouldn't it be just the tribunal asking the players questions is another thing? Because I know Franklin's, in brackets, council, attacked Cochin for acting and said he wouldn't be going to the Brownlow, which he gets a automatic invite to as a Brownlow medalist, and he should be going to the Logies instead. Again, maybe the case of two men with inflated opinions of themselves in council who probably, which would surprise a lot, kind of coming from the profession that they do, a lot rate themselves. And do they add anything to the system?
Well, you'd have to wonder what Jeff Edelson used to add to the Brownlow when he turned up 10 years after he'd sent his own footy club broke. So who knows who gets the invite to the Brownlow. There's all sorts of reasons behind that, I suspect.
All right. We'll finish with this because I know you've got to go, Judge, very, very shortly. The Saudi Golf Tour. Is it a case of World Series cricket being revisited? It's going to happen. Players are going to cross the line. Who wouldn't? They're offering more money than the PGA is offering.
Absolutely, Professor. I've been reading the media on this, the normal media, and it's nonsense. All the arguments they're putting up, and Phil Mickelson is so important, and he shouldn't be with his tour. Well, how good's the tour when a 50-year-old wins one of your 4 primary tournaments? I mean, I would have thought the game should look at itself and say, how good are we? I can't think of any other game where the amateur stage of the game is getting further away from the professional game, Professor. Tennis, everyone plays the same court, squash, swimming, whatever. Golf is now becoming a totally different game and separate from 99% of the people who are playing it. I think golf needs some real disruption. And if this is a disruptor, I hate it, by the way. I can't stand the Saudis. They're a murderous regime, but it doesn't matter. The players are going to get big money. They will go with the money. As you say, World Series cricket did. But I think golf needs some serious disruption, and maybe this is the thing that'll do it.
Well, the only answer that the PGA's got is to increase their prize pool to influence the golfers who are thinking of going to perhaps stay. The trouble is the Saudis have got a bottomless pit.
Bottomless pit.
They're not depending upon broadcast rights or anything like that to fund the competition. So it doesn't matter what the PGA do. The Saudis are always going to have $5 extra. It's like going to the auction with a person with a bottomless bank account.
No, I think the PGA Tour is worth $500 million. The Saudis, if they doubled it, the Saudis double it again. Money. If the PGA is going to play the dollar game, they'll lose that game. They have to appeal to golfers around the world. At the moment, it's not a very appealing game.
Well, the only thing that will affect us, Judge, is that the price of petrol will go up to
That is true. That is definitely
Cover
true.
the prize purse.
Got to go, guys.
All right. Thanks for being with us today, Judge. We know you're on a short fuse. We'll look forward to talking sport with you again next Sunday.
See you, boys.
See you
See
later.
you, boys.
All right, Gelding, that just leaves you and I. Your thoughts on yesterday's Flemington races as a mug punter like I am?
Oh, Professor, I think we saw some. Look, it's winter racing, so you expect what you expect to see. But I think we saw a couple of very, very good horses yesterday. I know for the listeners, we were on the winner of the last race, Passive Aggressive, which has now won 3 races out of 3 starts. That may be a horse to follow. I think it may be better than kind of winter racing. Also, we saw a development of a 2-year-old Gennati in race 2. This is a horse that's related to the Blue Diamond winner, Pride of Dubai. Won the 2-year-old race with its first start by 6 lengths. Professor, maybe one to follow. From my own point of view, I was very interested to see, looks like Elvis get up in the Winter Championship, the main race.
Yeah.
As it happened to knock off my horse once at Pakenham in a $100,000 race. So kind of good form. Good to see horses that you're competing against are providing forms on the main stage.
Well, that was an excellent ride, if I'm right, by Linda Meach.
Yes.
Some ducking and weaving through the field to get home.
The horse obviously has this thing that we probably lack, and what we talk about, in the other show, GM Racing, and that's racing, Professor, is horses that have got to turn a foot. This horse certainly got that, and it got it out of trouble, and it won itself the race. So after missing the start, it was really an incredible win and probably the win of the day, Professor.
Yeah, I wonder now the utility of watching videos of previous races, Gelding, because I spent a lot of time looking at form for the racing show and also looking at footage to see how horses run, where they're positioned, where they've come from in the field, and try and marry that all up. What I liked about Mask Up in race 5 yesterday and why I picked it was because it, as you and I described it, it had ping.
Yeah.
It got to the stage yesterday and I was looking at it and I thought during the race, well, this horse is going to win because it should win because it's well positioned or better positioned than it was in a race where it ran 3rd. And I was waiting for the ping and there wasn't any.
Just didn't, which was a bit disappointing, Professor, but really, and I know this is going to sound strange, but for you and the listeners, it was a very, very good pick. And as you said, during the running, you're waiting for this horse just to show that natural ping that it's got. And remember, it was at the juicy odds of $6.50 or something you picked up, Professor. It's just missed 3rd by a little bit, Professor, so finishing well for 4th.
Yeah, well, I was lucky.
You were thereabouts.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to get $2.20 the place, Gelding. So you can imagine there was tears watching that result.
Yeah, well, and rightly so, Professor. So, look, that form study that you do, as we try to point out to punters, we have certain filters that we like to look at, for horses to meet all these things. And there is also something to be added by looking at horses' previous runs and what they can do and what they can't do. Yeah.
All right, Gelding. Well, a truncated show today. Some of the talent is doing better than us, Gelding. You can't go for lunch because you're in quarantine. I could go for lunch, Gelding, but I got nowhere to go. So.
Oh, Professor, that's one of those things. Yes, in quarantine, and all that. But hey, nothing better than doing this show on a Sunday afternoon.
No, exactly right, Gelding. All right. Well, until I see you for That's Racing next Saturday, best wishes and a good afternoon to you.
Good